Hello and welcome to today's video lesson from the IELTS Coach. Today we are going to look at IELTS vocabulary practice for towns and cities. So welcome back to this lesson. As I said, we are going to look at some necessary words that you would need to use when talking about towns and cities. So these could be used in the speaking exam for part 1, part 2, or part 3. And at the end of the vocabulary list, we will give some examples of questions that you may be asked containing this vocabulary or where the answers should contain some of this vocabulary. So let's start with some of the buildings and places in a town or city. And we have a town hall, which is usually a government building where they hold regular meetings. Museums, obviously most towns or cities will have a museum where you can learn about the history of the area. A central market, train station, bus station. Obviously most either big cities or even small towns will have most of these things. We can also see if it's a coastal town, a harbor or a port, usually on the coast, or perhaps a river might have a port as well. There are gardens and parks in many small towns and cities, universities, churches, and a town square, which is an open area for people to gather in that town or city. Obviously, there are other places within a town or city, so think of other vocabulary that you can use when talking about these places. Now let's look at good and bad things that a town or city may have. So you might talk about the advantages or disadvantages of a city, and that would concern some of these things. So for example, transportation. Your city might have good transportation, good public transport, or it may be a bad thing. It may be dangerous. It may be old. But talking about transportation, the people. Most often we talk about how friendly and helpful the people in a town or city are. And think of the synonyms when we talk about people: citizens, residents, and things like that. Crime and laws, obviously, usually when we talk about negative things, there is a high crime rate in this particular city. Pollution as a negative, as well as rubbish and trash. If you're describing a place that you did not like because it was polluted, or there was a lot of crime or a lot of rubbish. Beggars, people asking for money, a lot of poor people in the town. Okay, another negative aspect if we're talking about a town or city. Street art may be considered negative, may be considered positive, depending on your opinion about that. The facilities of a town, the infrastructure, and things like transportation and prices and costs. Is it a cheap or expensive city? Okay, so when we talk about some of these things can be good and they can be bad. So that's why we have it in this list. Now let's look at adjectives used to describe a place. Adjectives for describing a town or city. It's a modern city. Old or ancient. Okay, the opposite of modern there. Dangerous, if it's a dangerous town or a dangerous city because of the crime. Peaceful, it's relaxing and calm and peaceful. Cosmopolitan. Cosmopolitan means a lot of different types of people live in that town or city. Traditional, it's an older style, traditional place to be. Exciting, with a lot of activities, or the opposite, of course, is boring, busy, and it's a scenic town. If we're describing an old town on the coast, perhaps it's quite scenic and a beautiful place to take photos. So as with all of the words here and all of the sections, there are other adjectives used to describe a town or city. Think of those. Your own town or a town that you like, think of appropriate words you can use to describe it. Finally, we're going to look at location and size. So especially in part 2 speaking, where it is, okay, you often have to describe where the place is. So for location, it's central. It's in the center of the country, or the market is in the center, okay, it's a central location within the city. North or south, eastern or western. So notice the differences there, different ways to give the directions. It is in the north of the city, or it is in the eastern part of the city. Coastal, I mentioned before, if it's on the coast near the beach, then it's a coastal town, or it could be in a mountainous area. It could be located in the mountains. It could be a very big city, so we could say a mega city, or a small compact city. It may be spread out, okay, so out over a large area, or similar to sprawling. The city is growing and getting larger and larger. Or it's quite a small, compact city, so it's walkable. It's easy to walk around the city and cover it on foot. You don't need to take other types of transport. So there we have the different vocabulary for describing towns and cities. Obviously, there are a lot more words that you could use, but think about the questions in part 1 and part 2 especially, where you might have to use some of this vocabulary. For example, part 1. Can you describe your hometown? What is most interesting about your hometown? How can I travel around your hometown? So talking about your hometown, obviously we could use this kind of language. With part 2, there's a few more varieties of questions. Could be describe your hometown, or describe a place you enjoyed visiting. Describe a city that you did not like visiting. So it could be positive, could be negative, but the language we use is going to be similar if we're talking about small towns or big towns or cities. So think about this vocabulary, learn some of this vocabulary, and practice using it when you do your next speaking exam practice. So thank you for watching this video. Please watch another video so you can continue to learn the skills you need for the IELTS exam. And don't forget, subscribe to my YouTube channel so you can get the latest videos as soon as I upload them. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.